Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the E.N.G Media Podcast. We have a very exciting guest, Sam with Hybo and Cloudfruit. For those of you just joining the podcast, I'm Christian Gannon, the co-founder of E.N.G Media, and we specialize in helping software and tech companies scale their revenue. So if you want to learn how to take your software or tech business to the next level, make sure to stick around. So let's get right into it. Could you share a little bit more about your businesses, the services you offer, and your roles within them?
Sure. Yeah, so Cloudfruit is a company I started back in late 2022. We've got three service lines right now. We've got Cloud Bloom, which is 0 to 1 product development. We've got Cloud Brain, which is AI development, and we've got Cloud Bridge, which is enterprise integrations. Um, we've been scaling the business up. I run a team of about 10-ish people, and then recently, about 6-8 months ago, we decided to try to kind of put our hands in the pot of AI and build something in that space. And so that's where Hybo was born. Hybo was actually kind of a product line of Cloudfruit. Um, and yeah, I've learned a ton along the way across, from starting and scaling an agency, starting and scaling a product. So happy to talk about both those things here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And how did the idea for Cloudfruit and Hybo come about? What gap in the market were you really trying to solve when you built them?
So Cloudfruit was purely a response to not wanting to work for other people anymore. Basically, back in 2022, I was working for Core, which is Sean Penn's nonprofit, and I was a director of technology there, and I had built a a product disaster relief application called, it's now on the market as Relief Compass. And I just, I got really, I saw a lot of the nonprofit world that wasn't pretty. I had come out of the hospitals and healthcare industry for about 15 years before that. And that wasn't pretty either. And just the level of inefficiency, the level of bloat, um, kind of the top down management styles, um, the the constant pivots that don't necessarily make sense, the lack of a focus on fiscal responsibility and budget management, um, the lack of a focus on addressing technical debt, just so many different things. Some of those things I learned, like, it's kind of hard to manage around. And then some of those things, like, we were able to do a pretty good job of not kind of running into them, granted at a smaller scale. But yeah, that's why Cloudfruit was born. So I literally started September of 2022, and I quit my other job, and I still did some contracting for a while, like under my own, like, basically as like a sole proprietor for a little bit while I was building up the company. But I started on Upwork. I found two clients pretty quickly, kind of some beginner's luck stuff. One was an analytics client. One was a um, application product development client. And the product development client started as, hey, I need to solve a business problem. Like, I'm using Monday.com for everything at my business, and I'm running into all of these different roadblocks and barriers that I can't get around. And we're actually still working with that client today. We built them a custom ERP that we're gonna probably take to market here in a bit, as an agentic ERP. Um, but yeah, that's why Cloudfruit was born. And then Hybo was born, and this is kind of one of the first mistakes I made. It was born as kind of a de-risking strategy, which sounds counterintuitive, but um, my team was already building another product, and the kind of work I was doing for Cloudfruit is very deep niche ERP work for a specific type of software. My team is largely offshore, and so it just wasn't making sense from a value standpoint for me to be doing this work that isn't really bringing value to the company as a whole, even though it's making us, nicely profitable and, like, was allowing us to invest in stuff. It wasn't really creating like reusable materials or reusable standards or reusable procedures or anything that could really scale effectively. So, and the team was, like, not fully engaged with just the one client. So we were like, all right, let's build our own thing. At the time, um, the context windows of AI was like, I don't know, 28,000 tokens or something. It was terrible. Like you would send 20, 30, 40 messages and the thing would stop responding. You'd have to start a new chat and retrain it, blah, 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 blah. So we tried to attack that problem thinking that the LLMs were like the front end, like ChatGPT was primarily just a way to train the LLM, and that most of their money was coming from corporate data, like basically training the LLM and then reselling the data. And I think that I vastly underestimated that, you know, that the like how the value of ChatGPT and like how it would get to where it is today. Like, you know, and so this was probably like November of 2024 when we started building it. So about 8 months ago or so. And and yeah, they just so quickly got the context windows. They just kept expanding the context windows. It kept getting easier and easier to chat for a long time. And we had to pivot. We pivoted so many times that we eventually kind of just got cornered into like AI for beginners. And it's just not really, we don't have enough runway left and it's not really making sense. So we've got a really nice base product in Hybo. It's integrated with Claude, DeepSeek, and OpenAI. It's got a pretty clean front end. Like we've got some good context management in there. We've got different little features that are pretty neat, but it's just not. We can't compete with the giants. Like they move way too fast. They have way too much money. Like we can't compete on product marketing or development, any of those areas. And so we've decided to just step back from Hybo for a little bit, kind of keep that base and try to see if we can find a kind of a more niche specific problem that we can solve. Whether like we started out B2C and that is also just incredibly hard. That's one of the things I've learned. And so maybe we pivot to B2B. Maybe we try to build some agents on top of it. Like maybe we build a social media scraper. You know, we've got a couple of ideas of what we could build. Um, but it's going to be kind of mostly just me building at this point rather than like a team around it and like very, very little marketing, very little to no marketing. And we'll just focus on scaling Cloudfruit for now.
100%. And thank you so much for sharing. And I think that's a good point that you made is that the pivots, and I think for a lot of entrepreneurs and people that run startups, pivots are so important, but they are so time consuming, right? In the sense of that you're believing in something so much that if it pivots and it doesn't work and you have to pivot again, now we're back to that same beginning process of now I have to pivot again. But I will say I did check out Hybo's integrations with chat. I really liked it just for the tone. I think a big thing that LLMs that I use, including DeepSeek, OpenAI, a lot of them, the tone is not right when you're trying to connect with other people, right? When I'm trying to ask them to write a message, it's never how I would say it, or it's never how I would word that per se. But that was a big thing that I saw had an advantage for my personal use with it because I did want to try it out before we hopped on the podcast as well.
Cool.
And it really helped in dialing in the tone.
Thanks,
But
man.
yeah, of course. And shifting kind of to my next question, what are the trends that you're seeing maybe in the agentic AI space or in that space in general right now?
It's crazy because every release of ChatGPT or Claude, like it swallows up a whole group of startups or startup ideas, and they're moving so fast and they're pouring so much money and they're willing to operate at a loss. Like they're operating at a multi-billion-dollar loss. Like there's no way you can't match that, you know. So
Right.
and they've created a pretty it's a pretty clean base. So like things like the connectors of ChatGPT are creating a lot of risk for anybody who has built any sort of agent whatsoever. You know, the custom GPTs, like there's just so many things. Claude code is insane, like absolutely bonkers. Like it's destroying Cursor probably. Like they're dismantling Cursor. Like Cursor, I don't think can keep up with Claude code. Replit can't keep up with Claude code. You know, there's the big players, OpenAI and Anthropic, basically, and Google. I think are just dominating the market right now. And so you've really got to you've really got to figure out how to differentiate yourself from them. And to me, it's like you have to find some way to have a value add product. Like what's done well in this environment is like Mid-Journey, VO3 probably. I mean, before it got purchased, like so the image and video generation, basically, because what they can't keep up with is that kind of technology. It's complicated and it's different. But Midjourney doesn't have text generation at all, right? So they don't have to deal with. There's so many little things that you have to kind of consider. That's what one of the things I've learned building Hybo is like even things like response formatting is incredibly complex, and they've come a long way. They have a really good output formatting when you talk to it. It can handle emojis, it can handle code blocks, it can handle all kinds of different things that like you might on first glance not consider. The like the statefulness of it. The APIs, the LLM APIs are stateless. So every time you send a message, you have to pass the whole previous conversation, or else it's just like talking to a completely new. It's like opening up a new chat window in ChatGPT and typing every time you chat, which is just like it's not going to work basically for pretty much any version of an app. So like at a minimum, you've got to build some sort of stateful architecture on top of the LLMs, even if you want to build an agent that works. Otherwise, unless the agent is just doing a random thing every time with no context, or unless the agent is going and gathering context before it does its thing, it's very challenging to build anything in the space. I think that's really that's not just going to get swallowed up by ChatGPT or Claude. So, other things that I think I've seen do well are like really niche tools that drive a workflow like deep, like a deep workflow. Like N8N has done a really good job. It's kind of meta. So it's like the video image generation tools, the meta tools that sit around the LLMs that are more than just wrappers in that they really like take the concept of text generation and create like a meta layer around it. And they're big products and they're very well funded and these are very hard things to build. And then very small tools that almost act like utilities, like maybe like a browser add-in that can follow you around and help you with prompting or whatever, but it's really, really hard because anyone can just pick up ChatGPT or Gemini, and they're going to find their way there through one of these major players. It's not like there's just one, out there. So it's I don't know. It's I say good luck to you if you're building anything that sits on top of an LLM right now. It's very challenging.
100%. And I really liked how you mentioned Midjourney and some of those bots creating artwork or graphics. One thing that, like you mentioned, that they don't get right a lot of the time is text generation in the art. And I know that that's going to come out at some point where it's adjusted and it will be accurate. But those are the two that I'm seeing too, just to back you up, is that the two things cutting through the noise right now that I'm seeing in the agentic space and in my network is number one, those bots are here to stay until these bigger companies can compete, right? Like VO3 is now owned by Google, correct?
Yeah.
So that one is now owned by one of the biggest AI places anyways. So, but the other one too is just like super niche bots, right? So like maybe in manufacturing tech, in mining, and then some in healthcare just for compliance and HIPAA and SOC 2 and all those things are so hard to get into that right now they have the edge, but who knows 5 years down from the line if these bigger corporations are going to step into those spaces, right?
Having worked in healthcare for a long time, I think they'll probably keep the edge. Like there's kind of always a separation of products between like good healthcare tech and good. Like I just saw an article the other day about how like all of the big players like Microsoft had a healthcare product that survived 15 years but is now dead. Google had one that died like twice now, and because of that very reason. It's about trust and it's about data privacy and it's about these are things that like I think as you get bigger it becomes harder and harder to manage effectively, and they can't really leverage economies of scale easily and sit like build on top of their existing products. And so I think that like if you're building in healthcare, cool, it's also hard for its own set of reasons. Like you need to have you kind of got to have deep pockets to get into the healthcare space and be successful, unless you're selling to doctors' offices and then you're competing with everyone else in the space, And so it's like if you're selling to hospitals and healthcare, like I've worked in them for a long time, there's 17 layers of security and vendor compliance and blah 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 blah. And if you don't have the time and money to go through all of those layers, like you're probably not gonna make it very far. And like, hey, if you make it at one hospital, like you might do a decent job at other ones. But the other thing is that a lot of these healthcare institutions have their own internal innovation centers. So like, I know I worked at Johns Hopkins for a while, and one of the things I built was an endoscopy scope purchasing tool. And the point was to try to figure out when to purchase more endoscopes, and when to repair them, and just a bunch of analysis around that, because they're expensive. Like each one is
Right.
$100,000 to $500,000 a piece. So, and then it also affects patient care, and not just patient care. Really, hospitals don't really care that much about patient care. They say they do a lot, but what they care about is revenue generated.
Right.
Right. So like what it affects is elective surgeries availability. Like if you only have 5 endoscopes and your case mix is such that you've got 3 appointments, you've got 3 rooms and 5 endoscopes, and it takes an hour to clean an endoscope, but an appointment takes 15 minutes, all of a sudden you either have to schedule your cases in a certain order so that you can make sure you have time to clean each scope, or you just don't have enough scopes. But then if you have too many scopes, then you've got these scopes just sitting there not being used, and you're wasting a lot of money. So it's like, but they swallow that up and they take it to their innovation center, and then they build it internally, and then they go and sell it. And so like, you're not, like, you have to get past all of the vendor layer, like the vendor like compliance layers, and then the other compliance, the data compliance, HIPAA compliance layers, and the internal innovation center at the healthcare system itself, which is just incredibly hard to do unless you have connections, essentially.
100%. And I've had 3 different agentic AI companies come on the podcast so far in healthcare. One was called Glendor, who does PHI sanitizing, which she said the same thing. It's incredibly hard to get through all those layers. And when you're finally in, now you have to do it all over again for the next hospital. I talked to another company called Enter Health that deals with RCM for hospitals. That one's getting a little bit more traction because it doesn't have as many layers necessarily, just because
Yeah.
it's helping them optimize billing and revenue, obviously. And then I talked to one more, Layer Jot, who does surgical trays and optimizing for
Tough.
the techs that are building out the trays, analyzing what tools are there, because he was explaining that a big problem in healthcare is, number one, the spend, because of the sanitization on every tool that goes in that operating room, used or not used,
Yep.
has to be cleaned, right? So if we
Yep.
have 4 tools that are never used, or we have the wrong tool there and we have to go get the right one, it's a huge issue, right? But like we said, those are super niche things in
Yeah.
the sense of, if you're not in that one column or that one vertical, it's going to be, like you were saying, almost impossible to compete,
Yeah.
right?
And then that doesn't even take into account like the EMR integration. Like the closer you are to the EMR, and the further you are away from revenue capture, which revenue capture is fairly far away from the EMR in like a healthcare
Right.
ecosystem. But like the closer you are to the clinical side, and the further you are away from that revenue cycle, like the harder it is, because Epic is also there to eat you up. Like they're just gonna, oh, you're building something cool. Like, well, we'll just build that in 2 months and copy it
Right.
and add it in as a base delivery product, so we can get 2 more hospitals on board. Like they're just savage. It's a savage
Right.
mentality. So yeah.
100%. And kind of a follow-up question to that, what are you thinking right now in the landscape that we're kind of discussing is making it challenging, like we kind of talked about, or maybe on the flip side, easier to operate in right now?
Just general AI, or like,
Just overall in your space with Hybo and Cloudfruit, in your
um,
landscape and your competitive landscape, I guess.
yeah, I mean, I think I covered the like hard parts of it for the most.
Mm-hmm.
Like other than the
100%.
general just amount of noise, like the
Right.
LLMs are kind of doing 2 things at once, I think. Like they're democratizing knowledge in a similar way that the internet and Google did like 20, whatever, 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But so like that's good, and like generally I think for humanity, I think it's probably good in the long term. I hope, at least. Like I hope that everyone knowing more and having more access to information is a good thing. Like it's more equal. um, but like, yeah, there's so much AI slop and garbage on the internet everywhere. And so like from the agency standpoint, trying to like stand out as doing quality work, it's a lot harder. So it's harder to just get heard or listened to or it's harder to get meetings. Like it's harder to do all these things. On the plus side is that it allows you to move a lot faster if you know how to guide it properly. Like from everything I do, like it reduces cognitive load and it increases speed. So like it makes me move faster because I don't have to spend as much time trying to think of like a list or like doing categorization is very, very hard, and it takes a lot of cognitive load, like it's a lot
100%.
easier for me to just brain dump and then get a clean list than it is for me to like whiteboard a bunch of stuff and then look at it for a while and then try to figure out, all right, well, what's my breakdowns of stuff and how am I going to break this work out for myself? And it's going from raw data to structured data in reverse is a lot easier nowadays. And like that kind of coding is a lot easier. Like every kind of coding development, like from architecture, troubleshooting, QA, front end, back end, like niche programming languages that like no one know, in-for process automation, like some ERP vendor, some mid-market ERP vendors, custom JavaScript language, like you know what I mean? Because like at the end of the day, everything kind of sits on everything else. So like in the LLM knows how to pattern match. So it recognizes like, oh, the base language of this thing you just sent me that you're confused about is this language probably. So I'm going to guess and give you like this information. And it's just so good at like helping you get unstuck. It can get you stuck if you're not paying attention and you're not careful, but it's so good at helping you get unstuck. It's incredible. And like it self-corrects really well. It's just, so there's so many crazy features about it. It must be how people felt if they were like in the middle of their career and they went from not having Google to having Google. You know what I mean?
Right. 100%.
And like the thing with Google, it took a while for there to be enough shit on the internet that you could Google stuff. You know what I mean?
Right.
But like it's already trained for you. So it's like a pre-trained Google in your hand that instead of you having to look through websites and try to find and battle against like the SEO Nazis and the people who are, like just gaming the system, like you get probably the best answer you're going to get on the first or second shot of asking a question. And it's just, it's pretty incredible. So yeah, like you can, and then that creates its own set of problems. Like analysis paralysis is a lot easier to get into, like the atrophy of your brain muscles, like you not having to try as hard. It's easy to fall into the pattern of just like do this thing for me, and like it's going to get easier and easier. Like it's easier for me to be lazy about like prompting a SQL query that I need to write and not really paying attention to what it's doing, just running it and seeing if I think it's the right results. Like that, it's easier to do that. So it's like it's just like with everything else, like when a tool comes along, like you still need to try to retain as much discipline as you need, right? Like
100%.
It's like when a graphing calculator came out, like you still need to know how to do calculus if you're doing architecture. But if you're just doing calculus for calculus sake to pass a class, maybe you don't. Maybe you just don't. Maybe you don't teach yourself that. But if you're doing architecture, you need to know how to do calculus. And then, of course, it gets to a certain point where like the tools are so advanced that you don't need that thing anymore. And so it's like it's trying to strike this balance between like, okay, how much should I use this tool? How much should I depend on this tool? Versus how much should I understand about what I'm actually doing here? It's hard to identify. It's like hard to self-identify that balance if you don't already know what you're doing to some extent. But you can always step back and teach yourself with it. And so like as long as you have the discipline or like I think as long as you have the drive to learn, then you're probably going to be okay using the tool. But if you just want to cut corners, like you're going to end up like screwing yourself over somewhere down the line.
100%. I'm glad you mentioned, just to add on to that, like I day trade in the mornings. That's like my second job technically. And then I run the business throughout the day. But for me, coming from somewhere who hasn't coded in that language. Like in trading, they have their own languages, right, for their own backend and for everything that you would code to automate or give indicators. That was something that was extremely hard for me to do. And like you said, I had to go back and learn, okay, what is this prompt poll? What is this poll? Okay, what is chat saying that I should use? And for something as niche as that, when I was doing it at the time, it was insane because I had to go learn and then teach chat almost, okay, this is what pulls this. This is what pulls this. Use this prompt here, right? Um, but it was extremely faster than if I went from square one on my own, went through the whole directory, right, and then wrote the code from scratch. But just in the saying of like, you either need to be an SME or willing to learn, right? One of the two, the in between isn't going to work if you actually want to get it done.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say it applies to everything. Like even just something like writing, even
Right.
something like if you don't know grammar, you're not going to do like on a basic level. Like you're going to end up writing an AI post that looks like everyone else's AI post. Like you
Right.
have to edit it. You have to take the time to edit
100%.
it, and you have to kind of create your own writing style. You can do it kind of like I'm sure I already had a writing style because I've been writing for before this came out. But like I imagine that if you were to start now and you're like, oh, I want to write content for a blog or something like that, like you need to kind of start to create your own writing style and delete some of the stuff that it's putting in there and inject your own thoughts. And like the way I approach like blogging, for example, is I'll brain dump my thoughts. I use GPT 4.5. I don't use any 4.0 or any of the other ones because they're just not they're not as good at writing. And then I'll get a blog output and then I'll copy and paste it into Medium, and then I'll go through like the whole blog and I'll just rewrite it. And I usually end up rewriting a lot more of the beginning and the end. And then the middle, I kind of just leave it because it's oftentimes it's just like supporting arguments for whatever you're trying to get, what point you're trying to get across. Sometimes I write artistic shit and then I just do that on my own,
100%.
But like if I'm writing something that's like informative, especially if I want to pull quotes in, like that's something incredibly good for it. Like I think academic writing is pretty much like just going to be fully AI generated in the future because it doesn't make sense to do it any other way. You still have to create a coherent argument, and that's where it can get challenging because it'll just do whatever you tell it. So obviously, so if you put in some crazy arguments that are like logically inconsistent or something, it'll still try to structure an argument that you have to read the output.
Right.
Or get in trouble.
100%. And I think a lot of people are in the same boat, including myself, in the sense of like when I make content, I have a way that I write. Like I didn't use it chat for school because I was already graduate. I was already out of high school and college by the time it was really useful. So I have this style of writing, but I do the same thing that you do. I brained up what I want the post to look like. Then I go into chat or another model and organize it in a way, and then I go back and reorganize it in a way that sounds personal and has a human touch, right? Because we both can tell now going through LinkedIn or going through social media, okay, this is written by AI. I've used AI so many times and almost everyone else has that post content. That is not a human being who had any effect on that. They just wrote a sentence and prompted it and here we are, right? So but kind of switching to the more personal side, what does your typical day-to-day look like as a founder?
Oh God. Hopefully it'll slow down a little bit, but like just between like recently I've had at any given time like 4 to 5 different like big things I'm working on, so I've got Cloudfruit, and then for Cloudfruit I've got 2 jobs with health systems that I'm working, and I'm an ERP architect for those 2 health systems. One I'm a reporting architect, so I do a lot of like reporting, writing SQL, building visualizations, data modeling, stuff like that, data validation. And then the other hospital, I'm more of an integrations architect. So I spend a lot of time building integrations between systems. And then I oversee the team that is building 1X ERP and HiiBo. So I do mostly like architecture and product and a little bit of marketing, a little bit of like development. I've been doing more development on the HiiBo side lately just so I can like kind of do it on my own as we move away from doing it as a team. But I do like a lot of, I love the back end. I do a lot of data modeling and like database stuff and like analytics and querying. And I set up systems and integrate systems and stuff like that. And then for 1X ERP, it's a custom ERP for a small manufacturing company based in Chicago. And so it's, spending time deeply understanding their business processes and figuring out, okay, what solution can we build that is in the context of the current solution we've already built, either working with users who are like, oh, this is an issue. He's got 90 people using it or so right now at the company. And it does time tracking, purchasing, job estimation, integrates with QuickBooks. And so the QuickBooks integration has been the hardest component of that. It's QuickBooks Desktop. So it's like not QuickBooks Online. It's a hosted QuickBooks that we've hosted on AWS, and it hooks directly into that. And QuickBooks Intuit is just awful. They're awful.
I can imagine.
They're so bad. Like they don't care at all about your user experience. They don't care at all about developer experience. Like, their API is so old. All of their technology on the desktop application is so old. And so that's the thing. And then HiiBo was like just kind of everything, like trying to zero to one product is truly insane, especially B2C, truly insane. Like I spend time getting my ass kicked on Reddit, like trying to post like, hey, we built this thing that like does this thing. And people are like, nobody cares. It's just like ChatGPT. You're just another rapper. Like this sucks. I hate you. Like I hate it. Don't want it. And it's like, okay, cool. Like just over and over again, just getting your ass kicked all day long on every social media platform. It's very deflating, but like, it's also like a lesson that the lesson I learned is like validate demand before you start building. And that was like, we like, I guess in a lot of ways, I thought I was smarter than the age old advice, like the sage. I was like, oh no, I can still like, I see a problem and like, I'm going to fix it. And, like the problem is already fixed now. So had to find a new problem. And like, once you're finding a problem, you've got a problem yourself, it's like, so yeah, that was a lot of my life for the past like 8 or 9 months. But yeah, so
100%. And that makes sense. And I know as a founder, especially in 2 different spaces, you're wearing a lot of hats all day long and trying to manage that in your head, which can be really tough. So, but leading up to my last question, it's a fun one, but a tough one. Hypothetically, if you had a magic wand and could solve just one problem within either of the businesses, what would that be?
Man, that's a good question. Sorry, I gotta think about this for a moment.
No, take your time. It's a tough one.
Yeah, it is. It's just like what comes to mind is like all of like just the overload of everything. And I don't know how to frame this into like a solution, but it feels like the problem is, for me at least, a lot of times the problem is like there's just so much noise. And there's noise coming from every direction. And it's like, eventually you can really easily get fatigued with like too much stuff coming at you, information overload, decision fatigue, like management fatigue, all different forms of fatigue. And I don't think the answer is a support group, because like, that's just more like that. Now you have social fatigue on top of all the other types of fatigue. It's like, there's just, I don't know, man. I don't know what the problem exactly is. I just know that like it's too much, basically. Like and I can imagine, like part of it is I've been doing too much, but it's hard not to do too much, And so it's like it's hard to retain a good strategy and then also be able to pivot that strategy as you need to, and with everything kind of coming at you at once. So like probably some sort of organizational tool that's like not Notion. Part of the problem is just there's just too many different things to use. Like you have to use at least like a financial tool, a messaging tool, a file management tool, a project management tool. Like, like you have to use at
Right.
least 6, 7, 8 different tools just to run a business. And then if you're managing people on top of that, like you need those people to be using those tools too. Um, so like, I don't know, maybe it's like enforcing standards, because like that's where it gets really hard, is like you can create standards all day and like documentation all day, but like if you end up spending too much time on those things, and you're paralyzed from that,
Right.
like, you're not moving. You're forcing people to like read stuff that is like it's cognitive overload for them, and they're an employee. They're not going to spend 12 hours a day on this shit. Like they don't care that much, nor
Right.
should they. So it's like a way to kind of create and enforce standards across all these tools that allow you as like a founder to keep shit organized generally, and like follow a set of standard operating procedures, or at least something to keep you sane from like constantly seeing different stuff, and to ensure that everyone that works for you is also following those same guidelines without overloading them with information to the point that they either just don't do anything at all, or it's too much and they can't keep up with it all. And then change management across that, because that, like, I could think of a million ways to build something like that, but like how do you manage change across all of that? It has to flow from a central point. So I don't know, maybe that's what HiiBo will become next. Like, now that I'm saying it out loud, it sounds kind of cool, but
That's
yeah.
awesome. That's awesome. And I think you're not the only one that feels that way a lot of days. I mean, me and my business partner, we have a couple people under us, but it's the same thing for us. What we've decided is our overarching kind of mission every day is fix the bottleneck. So whatever the biggest problem is that day, and then when we have time to fix the other things that are the smaller bottlenecks, we'll get to those. But fix whatever the main problem is for the day, and then spend the rest of our time. And we all know founders are working 12, 16-hour days. I don't think that is foreign. I think a lot of us are passionate about what we do, right? So it's almost impossible, like what you're talking about, of, well, I can't not work. Like, what else am I going to do? This is
Right.
what my life is for
Yeah.
right now. So I totally understand that. I think that totally makes sense. But to wrap up, if people want to connect with you or learn more about HiiBo or Cloudfruit, where could they go and how could they connect?
Definitely go to cloudfruit.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Sam Hilsman, HILSMAN.
Perfect. I will leave the links to Sam's LinkedIn as well as Cloudfruit's website in the description of this video, but I highly recommend you check out the incredible things they're doing in this space. But other than that, thank you again, Sam, for your time and insights today, and we will see you guys on the next podcast.